October 1720, the coast of Jamaica. A pirate ship is under attack, but there's a shameful secret history won't tell you. The fierce male pirates are hiding below deck, too drunk to even stand. On the blood-slicked deck, only two figures remain, swinging sabers and firing pistols against an entire naval crew. Their names? Anne Bonny and Mary Red, while their captain, Calico Jack, cowered in the dark. These two women fought a battle so brutal that Mary actually fired her own pistol into the hold to kill her cowardly comrades. This isn't a legend. It's a documented court record of a last stand that ended with a chilling verdict. If you had fought like a man, you needn't be hanged like a dog. Today, we're uncovering the true story of the two most dangerous women in the Caribbean and how they used a hidden biology to escape the gallows when everyone else was swinging. To understand that night, you have to start 3 weeks earlier, not at sea, but in an office in Spanish Town, where Sir Nicholas Laws was working through a complaint register that had been building since August. Laws was a lawyer before he was a governor. He thought in jurisdictions, not legends. By September 1720, the name John Rackham had appeared in his files 23 times. 7 fishing vessels stripped of gear, 2 merchant ships attacked, a sloop called Mary taken whole, each entry in the same flat hand. Stopped our vessel, took provisions and tackle, crew left alive. 1 clerk, 6 weeks. He signed the arrest warrant in September. 3 copies, 3 couriers, 3 routes. Mail in the Caribbean moved slower than rumor. An attack near Lucia reached Port Royal in 4 days. Spanish Town heard about it in 7. His instrument was Jonathan Barnett, whose sloop Tiger sat ready in Port Royal Harbor. Barnett was not an idealist. In 1716, he had testified against the previous Jamaican governor for ties to pirates, a man who understood exactly where the line between law and profit ran. Laws offered land and a reward. Barnett accepted. There was a crack in the legal machinery. Rackham had taken a pardon under the 1717 Act of Grace, issued through Nassau by Governor Woodes Rogers. That pardon voided the moment he reoffended. But Rogers' formal arrest order from the Bahamas would not reach Jamaica until October 1721. Barnett operated under a separate Jamaican warrant. 2 colonies, 2 jurisdictions, 1 man between them, not in safety, in a space where the Crown could close faster than he realized. Along the northern coast, docks sat empty at dawn. A lighthouse keeper near Negril Point had heard anchors scrape at night for 2 weeks. He had not gone to check. October 22nd, the William lay in Negril Bay. A lantern burned on deck. Barnett knew the position. The William had no watch posted that night. No lookout at the bow, no one on the stern with a lantern and a weapon. Rackham's sloop had been running Jamaica's northern coast for weeks, in short bursts, stopping fishing vessels, taking provisions and cordage, moving before anyone could organize a response. By the 3rd week of October, the operation had contracted to something smaller than piracy: survival logistics. The William was not built for sustained open water sailing. It had been at sea long enough that rum had become the primary concern of most men aboard. Rum bought from a local fisherman 2 days earlier had not lasted 2 days. Barnett came in dark, no running lights, the Tiger low and quiet across the bay. His method was standard for a privateer working confined coastal waters: close distance silently, fire 1 warning round from the deck gun, then board immediately if no surrender came. The warning shot crossed Negril Bay in the stillness, a single flat crack, the way gunfire sounds at night when there is no wind. The William did not answer. What followed is preserved through court testimony, not through any participant's own account. Witnesses aboard the Tiger described 2 figures on the William's deck, both in men's coats and long trousers, both armed with pistols and cutlasses. They were shouting down into the hold, ordering the crew up. No one came up. This is in the trial transcript. It is not a detail that has been improved by retelling. Mary Red fired her pistol into the open hatch, not at Barnett's men, but into the hold, at her own crew. 1 man below was wounded. No record says what she said before she did it. The action is the record. The boarding party was coming over the rail regardless of what happened on deck. and the only remaining variable was whether anyone else would stand beside them. No one did. Barnett's men came over the rail in the dark. The Williams beam was narrow, roughly 20 feet at its widest, and the two women had taken position at the mast, with the open hatch behind them. That geometry gave them something. On an unfamiliar deck, in the dark, against two armed and positioned people, a boarding party loses the advantage of numbers for the first several seconds. The deck was wet with night dew. The boarding party moved carefully, and those seconds stretched longer than Barnett had budgeted for. The air smelled of powder smoke and salt timber. They were taken by force. No negotiation, no offered surrender. Rackham was found below, in the hold, and he did not resist. Barnett's log is brief. Taken aboard after resistance. The document draws no distinction between who fought and who did not. The Jamaican coast sat as a dark line on the eastern horizon. Davis Cove was a few hours' sail. The trial was 3 weeks away. The morning of October 23rd was cloudless. Barnett brought the prisoners ashore at Davis Cove, a small inlet near Lucia on Jamaica's northern coast, before the heat became serious. Major Richard James of the island militia was waiting with a written order and a short column of men. His task was not judicial. It was logistical. Count them, record them, move them south alive. He counted 14. He wrote down 14 names. Beside two of them, Mary Read, Anne Bonny. His clerk added a notation in the margin. Female sex, not a commentary. A procedural flag. The Admiralty Court would need to know before it prepared its documents. The convoy set out before noon. The road south was unpaved and slow. 40 miles that became a day and a half of dust and humid shade. By the time the column reached the first settlement south of Lucia, the news had already passed it. A fisherman who had seen the prisoners at Davis Cove had told a neighbor. That neighbor had a boat. Port Royal knew before the horses had made 10 miles. Port Royal had the names by nightfall. By the following morning, a line had formed outside the Admiralty Registry in Spanish Town. Planters in pressed coats, harbor workers, merchants' wives. Some came to file property claims against Rackham, hoping to recover losses through the prize court. Others came more quietly, asking whether certain names were on the list. Among the 14, 9 were Port Royal men, sailors who had come aboard the William during Rackham's recent stopover, and were now repeating the same argument at every opportunity. Pressed into service, no cargo taken, no violence done. One of them, Thomas Daly, had started talking at Davis Cove and had not stopped. Major James had not acknowledged him. The Admiralty Court standard under the 1717 Piracy Act was plain. Presence aboard a pirate vessel was sufficient for conviction. The gradations of participation that Daly was describing did not appear in the statute. 2 prisoners were French, Jean Besnec and Pierre Cornelian, who had been aboard the William longer than the Port Royal men. No one recorded what they said on the road south, but they had assessed their situation with some clarity. The only reliable path away from a capital sentence in an Admiralty proceeding was to testify for the prosecution. By the time the convoy reached Spanish Town, both men had already decided what they would say. Laws received the prisoner manifest in his office. The same desk, the same smell of ink and damp paper. He stopped at 2 names in the list. Not from surprise, from procedure. There were almost no precedents in the Jamaica Admiralty records for women tried under the same capital piracy statutes as the rest of a crew. He opened his reference volumes before the convoy had finished unloading. The law said what it said. He simply needed to confirm how much of it applied to this particular situation. It applied entirely. The first Admiralty session was set for November 16th. The Admiralty Court convened at 7 in the morning on November 16th, 1720, in Spanish Town's limestone courthouse. The shutters were pulled half-closed against the early sun. Candles burned on the long commission table despite full daylight. The act required it. The room smelled of beeswax, tallow, and the particular dampness of thick walls that never fully dry. Governor Laws did not sit as a trial judge. He presided over a commission of 7, empowered under the Act for the more effectual suppression of piracy of 1717. The act required no jury, no defense counsel in the English common law sense. The commission examined evidence, consulted the statute, and voted. The process was designed for speed in colonial ports, and it delivered it. The secretary read the register aloud. 7 fishing vessels stopped and stripped along Jamaica's northern coast between August and October 1720. 2 merchant ships fired upon. A schooner near Port Maria Bay boarded. The sloop Mary taken in full, rigging removed, cargo cleared. Rackham entered a plea of not guilty. Lawyers noted it and called the first witness. Rackham raised the Act of Grace. He had taken a royal pardon in 1717, issued through Nassau under Governor Woodes Rogers, and argued it still held. Lawyers had the response prepared. The pardon was valid only through the first subsequent criminal act. The register documented 23 violations committed after the pardon's date. The commissioners consulted for less than 4 minutes. The argument was not raised again. Jean Besnec and Pierre Cornelian testified in sequence. Their statements were specific, consistent, and detailed enough to be clearly first-hand. Attacks named, crew members identified. Rackham's command confirmed at each incident. Neither man was challenged in any meaningful way. Both were acquitted before the afternoon session began. They left through the main entrance, while the remaining prisoners sat in the corridor outside. The 9 Port Royal men made the same argument in different forms. Coerced into service, uninvolved in violence, absent during key raids. The 1717 statute made no accommodation for degrees of participation. Presence aboard a pirate vessel at the moment of seizure was sufficient for conviction. Thomas Diley produced a written statement from a Port Royal merchant, claiming Daly had been at the man's property during one specific attack. The document lacked the city registry seal. Laws rejected it without extended comment. The merchant appeared at the Admiralty office the following morning to attest in person. The session had already closed. Verdict before 4 in the afternoon. Rackham and 4 principal crewmen. Execution at Gallows Point, Port Royal. The remaining men, Kingston, 2 days following. 9 hours, start to finish. The street outside had been quieter than usual all day, the way streets go quiet when people know what is happening inside a building without needing to be present for it. Mary Read and Anne Bonny had not been in the room. Their case was recorded as deferred. November 28th. When the secretary read past their names, someone in the gallery coughed. The next name was called immediately. November 18th, 1720. 2 days after the verdict. The gap was calculated. Laws had given condemned men enough time to understand their position, not enough time to build a petition or find a sympathetic ear in the right office. Gallows Point sat at the southwestern edge of Port Royal, where the harbor mouth opened into open water. The crowd that morning was not the kind that celebrates. It was the kind that comes to confirm. Dock workers, sailors, a few planters, children who came on their own. The air smelled of low tide and hot sand. The gulls were loud above the point and indifferent. Rackham was hanged without a recorded final statement. His body was then fitted into an iron gibbet, a cage of welded bars shaped to the body's dimensions, and suspended on a small quay at the entrance to Port Royal Harbor, where every vessel arriving or departing would pass within clear sight line. Laws understood harbor geography. The placement was deliberate. The quay would eventually carry the name Rackham's Quay, and the name would outlast the cage, the body, and everyone present. 10 days passed. The limestone courthouse filled again on November 28th. 4 witnesses testified. 2 fishermen, 2 sailors from vessels Rackham had stopped along the northern coast. Their accounts were short and consistent. Women aboard the William, both armed, both active during the resistance at Negril Bay. The commission withdrew, returned, and announced the same verdict it had reached 12 days earlier: death by hanging. Then both women spoke. English criminal law permitted a condemned woman to petition for a stay of execution by declaring pregnancy, pleading the belly in the formal court language. The claim could not be dismissed outright. It required a jury of matrons. Local women convened specifically to examine and render a collective judgment. legally binding without medical qualification. Lawes assembled the jury. The jury affirmed both pregnancies. Sentences remained in force. Executions were deferred. Whether either woman was genuinely pregnant, the documents do not settle. Lawes recorded no personal view. In later dispatches to London, he described both cases as unresolved, not with evident feeling, but with the precision of a man who kept accurate files. Charles Johnson, in his General History of the Pirates in 1724, wrote that Anne Bonny was permitted to see Rackham before his execution. Her words as Johnson recorded them: "She was sorry to see him there, but if he had fought like a man, he need not have been hanged like a dog." Johnson is not a court record. Every line he wrote requires distance, but the quote has stood for 300 years, unreplaced and uncontradicted. The gibbet cage at the quay entrance kept rusting. The harbor kept moving. December 1720. Spanish Town's Admiralty files remained open. 2 sentenced women were in the parish jail, a condition the colonial legal system had produced and was not designed to efficiently conclude. The jail was limestone and heat, walls that sweated in the dry season and wept in the wet. Water drawn from open cisterns, overcrowded cells where typhus moved without notice. Prison fever, the period called it, a term that covered several causes and committed to none. Mary Read died there in April 1721. The St. Catherine Parish Burial Register records a single entry, dated April 28th. Mary Read, pirate. No cause of death. No comment. The registrar's hand did not pause. The entry sits between 2 others with equal spacing and the same ink weight. One line among many in a ledger that recorded them all without distinction. Whether she died of typhus, of complications from pregnancy, or from the combined effect of 4 months in that building, no record states. The prison kept no medical documentation worth the name. What survives is the burial entry. It is exact. Name, occupation, date. Anne Bonny's trail splits and does not rejoin. One account places her released from custody and returned to the Carolinas, where she married a man named Joseph Burleigh and died in 1782 at the age of 82. A second trail produces a burial entry on Jamaica for a woman named Anne Bonny, dated 1733. Both records exist. Neither eliminates the other. The gap between them is not closed in 300 years. Barnett received his land grant and his commission payment and continued under privateer license. Lawes drafted the closing dispatch to London. The piracy threat along Jamaica's northern coast had been neutralized. The Admiralty filed the report. The case was closed. On Rackham's Quay, the iron gibbet corroded within the year and was taken down. The name remained. It still marks the Port Royal Harbor entrance on navigational charts. No explanation attached. In 1724, Charles Johnson published A General History of the Pirates. He described the fight at Negril Bay in detail no court record contains. The crew below, the boarding party's hesitation, the 2 women at the mast. He gave the story a shape the Admiralty transcript had withheld. Whether Johnson was a working sea captain, a London journalist, or a pseudonym for Daniel Defoe, historians have not resolved. The court transcript is the more accurate document. It has been read by far fewer people. Between the burial entry of April 28, 1721, and Johnson's first printed page in 1724, 3 years of silence, ink, and salt. The versions that followed are the ones that lasted. That is not a verdict on their accuracy. It is the record of what happened next.